schedule coming out here. So me and AJ are going to talk today about the history of the fire department, how it's evolved throughout the years, some of the equipment they've had throughout the years, some of the memorable fires that Earlville's experienced, and also where the fire department is nowadays, and talk about some of the equipment they have, why they have it, and some of the associated costs, because as we all are taxpayers, why the things cost so much. So hopefully we can explain some things. If anybody has any questions while we're going through the slides or whatever, please speak up and ask.
Is that correct?
Except for anybody from Leland Fire Department who might have showed up this morning. Which we do appreciate them coming, as we do all of you. So, let's see if we can, and again, you're probably going to find some stuff that might be a little off on my dates. I use the newspaper in Earlville a lot. At nighttime at work, it gets pretty dead in there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So, spend the time going to the newspaper. So, if you see a date that's off, please, again, once for the historical site, I'm sure you guys know, but. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Maybe. Here, you've worked that. It's supposed to go forward. Chris, what'd you do?
I didn't do anything. Did you turn is the little switch off?
There's got to be a glitch every time. It was working for Chris, I swear it was. Maybe. Hold on one second while we figure this little problem out. It did work 15 minutes ago. Always a technical problem. There you go.
Yeah, well, just a second.
If we have to do the manual thing, we can always do the manual thing. All right, go ahead, AJ. I'll let you have the clicker. There we go. All right, so we all know that Earlville was incorporated somewhere around 1834. This is what I could come up with. And became a town 1863. I guess it was settled around 1834. Go ahead and click forward. So going through the newspapers, the old Earlville leaders, gazettes, whatever they were called years ago, the first documented fire that I could find was back in 1868. Because I think the leaders, and Chris, correct me, they didn't start online until, what, right around 1866 or 1867.
Yeah.
I don't know when they started, if, you know, what year the newspapers in town started. But anyway, the first one I could find, again, was a fire at some place called Shields and McManus Grocers. Any idea where that would have been? Because I have no idea where that was. I was not there. AJ might have been, but I was not.
I know Don was. Don was, for sure.
So, anyway, that was the first documented fire. How did they fight fires back then? There was no fire department, the old bucket brigades. You know, you had a pail, maybe your neighbor had a bucket, and they would just sling water. And, you know, it never saved buildings. It never got inside. Nowadays, firefighters are taught to go inside, put the fire out, but years ago, all they had was a bucket brigade. So after probably, I don't know, 20, 30 years of the city being in existence, they started talking about fire protection. Other cities and towns had fire protection. They started buying equipment for their guys. So in July of 1887, the city decided to purchase a horse-drawn hook and ladder cart. It was made out in Seneca Falls, New York by Rumsey and Company, and the city spent $347 on it. And it came with an assortment of ladders. There was 16 rubber buckets, some axes, there was crowbars, things called pike poles, which firemen still carry today, use just basically for pulling stuff apart. So that's some of the equipment that they had on it when it was purchased, and this is the cart here. So when the guys, in my understanding, the guys who were on the fire department years ago, and you guys saved this, just share out of the way. I believe the only thing that was original was the frame, and then maybe the axles, the front and back axles. These wheels were not original. The guys from the fire department went up to, I think, Bill Budak and
Yes.
Tony Hamill.
They went down to Amish country and had wheels made. The Amish actually
In Wisconsin.
It was in Broadhead, Wisconsin, and an Amish gentleman replaced or made the old wheels to the specifications that would have been on the original cart. The fire department still has this cart today, but it came in 1887. Here's some pictures of what that cart would have looked like when it was purchased. This one, of course, is a museum. Here's more of an older photo. It just has an assortment of ladders on it, some various hand tools that the firemen would use. But that's the old pictures of it. This was stored at City Hall. For those that don't know, this would have been in the area where the bank's at right now. I always call this building Uncle John's building. John Simpson had his corn shelling business in there. This, of course, was the old City Hall, and my understanding is this door on the left would have been where they stored the old fire cart. And then if you would have went up in the doors here, I think that would have led to offices and probably the City Hall up top. And then in the cupola, go back one, AJ, if you could. The cupola is where they had the old fire bell. But it was stored inside there. And what year, Chris, do you think they tore this down? Because the bank was built, what, maybe the early, mid-80s?
I would have to walk back to our display on the City Hall.
Yeah, so I'm not too sure when this building was torn down. I remember it as a kid.
Yeah.
Going up, and we would sign up for Little League and things in the second floor of the City Hall. But that's where the fire cart was. And when they tore this down, my understanding was, and Dad or other guys in the fire department, this was in the basement, so evidently there was a basement in this building.
It's in the basement.
And they were able to save the frame and the axles. Took it over to the fire department, and then they decided to try restoring it. I know they talked it down at Schreckengost about redoing the artwork.
Yes.
Because it had like gold leaf
Scrolling on the sides.
scrolling on the sides, and they still have the hooks and stuff that the tools hang on or hung on.
Yes.
But anyway, go ahead and go to the next one, AJ. Here's a picture. So they ordered that cart in 1887, early 1887. I want to say maybe May, June, July, something like that, whatever the date was. But here's a picture. The first picture the Historical Society has. This picture was taken in Labor Day of 1888 of the first founding guys. This was evidently taken at the old school grounds, which I'm assuming where maybe the gymnasium was, what I remember as the old school. This was taken in the schoolyard up against the fence. So here are some of the listing of the charter members of the Earlville Hose Company #1, and that's what it was chartered as. It wasn't called the Earlville Fire Department back then. It was Earlville Hose Company. Even though they didn't have hose, they called it Earlville Hose Company #1. So some of the names I remember, they're names you still see around town. Haas, Grimm, Schreck.
Clyde Snow was the first.
Clyde Snow, yep.
Was the first chief.
Was the first chief, and actually we'll get into that. It actually was a fire marshal. They didn't have fire chiefs back then. They called them fire marshals. Okay, this one I threw in last night at 3 o'clock in the morning. In November of 1887, the city decided to pass an ordinance relating to the fire department. How it was going to be organized, the rules and regulations, talked about nobody was allowed to take equipment out of the building. Monies, those guys were paid. They decided at 50 cents an hour. If there was a fire call, the firemen got paid back then. And the fire marshal, because in the organization, they decided to make a fire marshal, but they gave the fire marshal permission to cut, pull down, or remove structures that were either burning or could possibly be burnt to, I guess, save. You know, if you had a building that was on fire and if they needed to go 2 or 3 buildings forward and pull your building down to save the block, they were allowed to do that. And again, Ed Snow was appointed a first fire marshal. So back in September 1890, the city council met. I couldn't find a picture of the city council, so I decided the House of Lords over in England. I'm sure the council wasn't that, council meetings weren't that glamorous back then, but they decided that besides this ladder and all these tools these guys had, they needed something to pump water, because all they still had was the bucket brigade. And other towns, other cities were getting, maybe you guys would see the pictures of the old steamers, the horse-drawn steamers that would pump the water. The city wanted to do that, but they didn't have a lot of money. And so this guy come along to the council, showed up one day, and pitched his fire machine. And it was a 1890 Howe hand-drawn pumper. It was made over in Indiana. Took about 8 to 10 men to operate. It pumped about 200 to 300 gallons a minute. The council went back and forth and decided to purchase it back on January of 1891. And they also called this a chemical engine as well. So in this tank of water, go ahead and go forward, AJ. I think there's a couple more pictures here. there's different angles of this. And then again, this hobbies go back one if you could, bud. This one here is out in Arizona at what's called a Hall of Flame. It's like a firefighting museum. So they actually have an 1890 Howie, and this one actually came from Illinois. Pecatonica, somewhere up that way is where this one came from, but they have it out there. This is, talking to the guy from the museum, this is probably the same kind of one Earlville had. They were very popular back then. He said they were sold to small towns and villages that did not have a lot of money. And you had about a 100 to 150 gallon water tank that would come with it, depending on which model you bought. And if you bought the right model, they would sell you soda acid. And my understanding is you tossed this soda acid in, and it would pressurize this tank. They wouldn't have to pump, it'd just dump the water real quick, almost like a seltzer bottle, soda bottle, and it'd dump the water real fast.
Because they would, if you didn't have that, the black bars right there, you had to have guys on each side and they go like this.
Right, and if you go to the next slide, I actually threw a video clip into this. See if you can get that to play. Gives you an idea of what these guys would have had to have done.
Is it a middle button there to?
See if we can get this video clip to work. So it gives you an idea of understanding. There we go. So it's pretty labor intensive to use something like this. It wasn't something that would be operated by one or two guys. It took about 5 to 10 guys at least, a minimum, to make it. And those guys were smoked and they were done in a minute. They were done, they were tired. But that's the first piece of pumping apparatus that the city had bought. But it came with problems. Evidently this thing did not work like it was supposed to. And there was some squabbling going on. Some of the people in the city thought that was too much money. I could not find in any of the newspapers how much they spent on this thing. I looked and looked and looked, could not figure that out. Well, whatever they spent, the city was kind of torn in two. They were not happy with it. And it pissed off the fire department. And the fire department at that time, Hook and Ladder Company Room 1, wouldn't have nothing to do with it. In fact, I found, in February 20th, 1891, there was a little ad, and I wasn't even an ad, it was just like a little blurb in a newspaper. The Earlville Fire Company, even though we understand, do not take kindly to the newfangled lawn sprinkler, just brought here as a result of the weighty deliberations of the city council. At the meeting, they voted to have nothing to do with the concern of us. It was only for the agents agreeing to pay that they would give their services to the trial of the unit. The boys of the fire department won an enviable reputation with their current outfit, and when they come to tell their children and their children's children of the good times past, they will not have nothing to do with the old machine. So they were not happy with it. They would not have nothing to do with it. And when the city council wanted to see it in trial, so they would pay the bill, the salesman actually had to pay the guys in the fire department to operate it so they could show the city. So yeah, it came with some problems. And then also I found the agent or the salesman offered $25 to a couple of the aldermen at the time and also the fire marshal for their vote. So that came out in newspapers. So there was politics back then too. But $25 was the going rate at that time for a vote to purchase this machine. So flash forward a couple months, it was listed by Fire Marshal Large of what the fire department at that time had. They had 35 members. You can see the equipment that they had to work with at the time. Rubber coats, ladders, lanterns, quite a bit of stuff for back then. All right, AJ. Now we come to the age of, we're starting to get vehicles and cars running around. So the city started talking about getting a motorized apparatus instead of the old horse-drawn or hand-drawn cart or hose cart. So in February of 1924, they bought or purchased an open chain Boyer fire truck. It was on a Dodge chassis, and they paid almost $5 grand for it. And they got it in 50 to 60 days. So Larry Todd, I see him in the back. If you were to order a fire truck today, how long do you think it'd take to get a fire truck if you order it today?
Probably 6 months.
32
Yeah.
months.
6 months, a year, at least?
32 months right now, we just ordered 2 of them.
How long was it?
32 months.
32 months out from the date of order.
Place an order now, yes, and you
Yeah.
get 3/4 of them.
So this little contraption, you had a seat up front that would hold a couple guys, and you got a tailboard in the back for 3 or 4 guys, maybe. So remember this picture of this truck, because things are going to get interesting here in a little bit. Flash forward to 1944, the fire district was formed. There's a couple articles there about it. The first trustees were Harlow Miller, Jeff Larson, and Harry Lee. I don't know the names, some of you guys might remember those names. I have no clue. Who are the current trustees for the Fire Protection District now?
Bill Loney,
Bill Loney,
R.E. Larkin,
R.E. Larkin, and
Al Fain,
Al Fain.
and Jenny Smith's the secretary.
And Jenny Smith's the secretary treasurer. So, but that's when the fire district was formed, and the reason they formed that is, at the time, the city people, if you were living in the city limits, you were paying a tax to the city for fire protection. Well, then they decided, well, you have a fire and you're a mile outside of town, you want that fire protection, they want your tax money. So that's why they formed the fire districts. They want more money. All right, AJ. Next few slides talk about fundraising. The fire department has had oodles of ideas for fundraisers throughout the years. Firemen's dances, I can remember a toy show when I was on the fire department. Family portraits, I'd have a photographer come in. Of course, raffles, food booths, at whether it was fun days parades or whatever, pancake breakfast recently you guys had, steak fries. I remember one time there was a Hawaiian luau, which I couldn't find anything about it, but I remember a Hawaiian luau down at the lake, and bake sales. And they still do. You know, they cannot live just on tax money alone, so their guys are always still out there having fundraisers and trying to raise funds for a piece of equipment or whatever. The first fundraiser that I could find was back in October of 1887 up in Robinson's Hall. So Chris, where was Robinson's Hall?
On Railroad Street on the north side, probably over what's now the Earlville, well, it used to be the Earlville Leader Office, up in that area.
Above where the leader office used to be, okay? So Willis's Orchestra of Ottawa is who gave your entertainment for the evening. And the menu that night was an oyster supper, which I don't know what that was like, but I suppose at the time it was a big sell. So, and that was prepared by the ladies of the Universalist Church, and for those that don't know, wasn't that down the street here where Doc Fisher's house was on the corner, or was that to the north where?
It's across the street from Doc Fisher's office.
To the north, where
right.
McWade's
It's kind of an empty lot right now.
Okay. Is that where also would be like where McWade's live, or Harris's house?
Yeah, because
Harris's
McWade's house was built with the bricks from the Universalist Church.
Really? Okay. So that was the first fundraiser that I could find. And then throughout the years, flashback forward to probably maybe the 70s, 80s, I don't know when the girls started.
Karen Tillman would know.
Karen Tillman's here. There you go.
Where is she?
So the Firemen's Wives got together and they wanted to have a little social club and help raise money for their husbands in the fire department. Hence the Earlville Fire Bells was created. And they always had a ton of different fundraisers and things they did to help out the guys. Whether it was a bad fire, the girls would get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and come make coffee for the guys, or a sandwich, whatever the case may be. But they did things like the Super Supper, where they had all kinds of different soups, had garage sales. So they were huge on fundraising for the fire department. Here's a couple nice snapshots from back in fun days years ago. Mary Simpson, which was my mother, Chris Goodbread, Connie Miller, Judy Fain, Teresa Butts, Karen Tillman, who's here.
She said she'd sign autographs.
Oh, perfect. And then, of course, Sandy Cox sitting down there. And, of course, who can forget about Dottie? She was a hell of a lady. She was big into the Historical Society Museum, always big into fire departments, would come up and help. What I remember about Dottie is every time they had a fireman's dance, she always had to back in one of the fire trucks, religiously.
Yep.
That was her job, you know. So she was always big in helping out the fire bells. So I tried to work on the chiefs throughout the year. So we know that this Mr. Snow was the fire marshal. I don't know what year they changed from fire marshal to fire chief, but I know that fire marshal changed pretty regularly. Every few years the city was changing that out. But I was able to go back from current, which we have Larry Todd in the back, he's your current chief, my dad, Larry Simpson, Chuck Howie, and Chuck's daughter, Diana, or is it Diana, is right here up front.
Either one.
She's here. Her dad was chief from 48 to 83. I do not know who Thomas Smith was. Charlie Steele, I remember that name, hearing about it throughout the years, throughout the history of Earlville. He was did a lot of stuff, I think, in the city, different businesses and stuff. Was he a blacksmith, or what did he do? Or what business did he?
Harness shop is what they
Harness
had.
shop. And where would that would have been?
Next to the left of the barber shop.
So where
Sandy's place
Sandy's
is at
Lounge
right
is
now.
right now. That's where his
Correct.
place was. So anyway, those are some of the chiefs throughout the years. It's not a complete list, of course.
Right, he was one of the ones that was instrumental in getting the whistle, the fire whistle, too.
Charlie was instrumental in getting the fire whistle. Okay, I did not know that. Excuse me. Here's a couple of snapshots of some of the past fire chiefs. There's Chuck Howie. This would be him here.
And Bill Hudak next to him.
And we think that, yeah, we think it's Bill Budak. And
Steve's
Bill's son Steve is here. I don't know where this is taken at. I think it was taken, I want to say it was something called the Strong and Strong Fire. Is that where when the mill burnt, Dad? That's what we were talking about.
The building next to it.
The building next to where the mill was, which was out on Northwestern Avenue or Northwestern Street.
Equipment shed where they kept their trucks.
Is that where it was? Equipment shed? So that's where that picture was taken. I'm assuming it in the 60s. And then a picture of my father, Dad, go ahead and go forward. And your current fire chief, man of the day, Larry Todd. So, go ahead, AJ. Okay, injured firefighters. Throughout the years, Earlville has had injured firefighters. These are not, of course, pictures of Earlville's guys. But, remember that truck I told you to remember? Back in 1935, that old Oban chain Boyer, the boys were going up to Pawpaw, and just north of the Wyoming Cemetery, in January of 1935, they flipped this thing. And there was 6 guys on that truck. There was 2 in the seat and 4 on the tailboard, and I apologize, I can't read it this close, but there was 4 in the tailboard and 2 driving it, and they flipped this thing. And they had everything from skull fractures, spinal injuries, broken ribs, bruises, and lacerations. There's the picture of the truck again. So they had that thing pretty well packed going up there, especially in January, the coolest month of the year. I found this article a couple weeks later down the road, and it talks about Charlie Steele. Again, we just talked about him. They're slowly recovering, and it talks about, besides Charlie Steele having a skull and broken jaw, they were also badly frozen about the face and the neck because they drove all the way from Earlville to Pawpaw in January. And, you know, the clothing at that time was not conducive to keeping you warm, I'm sure. So, of course, I had to throw a little joke in there about Chuck Norris, he bites frost. So, they rolled the truck back in, what was that, 1924?
24.
Flash forward about 40 years, we have another accident.
And we're going to Pawpaw again.
Going to Pawpaw again. Where's Mr.?
Steve Sellers.
I said, do we have Steve Sellers here from Pawpaw? So we can
He's
kind of blame
assistant
some of this
chief.
on
Yeah.
Steve and his guys.
John and I saw that accident.
Did you really? So
We
this,
were on the way out to the farm.
okay. In the paper it talks about the intersection by Ray Hitchens' farm, but my understanding is,
Matasius.
right by where Kay and Beck Matasius lived, that intersection there. So they had a vehicle going north, and I think the fire truck was coming from the east. Going west.
Yeah.
And they met at that intersection, and that truck rolled. They had 2 guys on that truck at that time. They didn't have 6, thank God. But Chuck Howie, Diana's dad, he had a break in his shoulder. He had to have surgery for it. And I think he was wound up in Aurora for rehab and surgery, correct? And then Benny Sherlow, which I remember him, when I got on the fire department, he was still hanging around. And how long was your dad laid up?
About 6 months.
About 6 months. And he's a volunteer fireman, not getting paid nothing for it, and just going out helping another town, and got laid up for 6 months. Lucky he didn't get killed. Here's a picture of that truck. You can kind of see where it was sitting at, because this would have been on Railroad Street. You can see the building down there, and this was like maybe the implement shop, maybe, that was in front of it.
John Wood's implement.
John Wood's implement shop. But there were 2 pictures up at the fire department I found on this truck. So those guys are really lucky they didn't get killed. And it mentions in there that when Chuck Howie came to, he was laying in a ditch, and the ditch was full of water. Because the 1,000 gallons that thing was probably, I'm thinking it was probably 1,000 gallons.
750 maybe.
Dumped into that ditch, and you're lucky you didn't drown on top of getting thrown from the vehicle. So they've had their injuries throughout the years. You know, firefighting is not a job where things can happen and go wrong. And things, yes.
That's why we do not mutuate the pawpaw anymore.
You know, that's a smart move. It was probably put out by your insurance company. That was a directive from them, you know. Al Fain said you can't go no more. Unfortunately, Earlville has had line-of-duty deaths. One I knew about, one I did not know about. This one I did not know about. So Charlie Steele came up to a call for a brush fire back in 1956, had a heart attack and died after setting off the siren for the guys. Heart attack and died right there at the station. So my quest in the future, shortly, is I'm going to try to get that death certificate, and if we can prove it, I want to get him recognition down the state. Can you back up a slide, AJ? This is the monument down in Springfield for the Illinois State Fallen Firefighters. So, you know, nowadays if a firefighter were to get killed, he's going to qualify for 2 death benefits. He's going to get a federal and a state death benefit, which is roughly, I don't know, I'm going to guess $750,000, somewhere right around there. Charlie's family, of course, would not get that nowadays, but he would still get his name probably on a brick and at least get, you know, he would at least get mentioned and get the coverage he deserves, because it was a line-of-duty death. So, this guy here, I learned a lot from him when I joined the fire department.
Both did.
Yep, Ed Conklin. So those who remember where Alfano's used to be, up there by the BP, it's what, Sunshine Family Restaurant
Yes.
now?
Yep.
Used to be Alfano's Pizzeria. There was a fire out there. My understanding was it was an arson fire. And Ed and some of the guys here, I know my dad went. Who else had to go up to testify? And this is, what's that?
My dad.
Bill.
Bill Budak had to go. Who else?
Tom Whiteman,
Tommy Heitman had to go.
Tony Cox.
And Tony Cox had to go. These guys had to go downtown to Chicago to the federal building because it turned into a federal case because of insurance, trying to get insurance money. That's my understanding. And these guys had to go downtown Chicago to testify. I was told that Ed was very nervous about testifying and was just didn't want to do it. But he got on the stand, and unfortunately he had the big one and collapsed right there on the witness stand while he was testifying. And Dad or you or Tommy, you guys would probably know, my story is that you guys, they come out and got you guys and went in to help Ed, and you guys were doing CPR, and they got Ed back. I think Ed maybe lived for...
Tony Cox's wife she was the first one to him, started CPR on him.
Okay.
And our guys helped, but in the end, Chicago firemen arrived, took over that, and took him to a hospital. But
Yeah. Ed survived, you know, for a few hours or a day, but then unfortunately he passed away. So, and there's a picture of the brick. Here it is, right here. Earlville Fire Department, Ed Conklin. Again, that's down at that memorial down in Springfield. So, you know, maybe down the road, if Charlie Steele qualifies, maybe we'll get Charlie's name on a brick one day. But anyway, the potential is there for these guys that go out. They can get injured, and unfortunately sometimes bad things happen. So I tried to pick out a few buildings throughout the area that we all might remember when they burnt. Of course, I totally forgot that probably one of the biggest fires Earlville had was the downtown fire at the Wallace House.
Yeah, actually there were a couple fires that took down like multiple buildings.
Yeah.
On both streets.
On the one I'm thinking of happened around 1900, 1904, something like that. And unfortunately, I totally missed that one, so I apologize. But they have had major fires in downtown Earlville. AJ, here's those who remember the old hemp mill out on Route 34. Here's some pictures. This was in September of '75, and I can remember it being at school and watching out in the playground and watching the smoke. But here's some pictures that the guys at the fire department still have of that building, or or it was a series of buildings, I guess, out there, it wasn't
Yeah.
just one building. Burt's Meat Locker out on Water Street, for those who remember where Burt's was. Here was a picture, and that burnt in February of '79. I got a bunch of pictures from Burt's daughter, I'm trying to remember her name, I'm drawing a complete blank right now.
Carol.
Carol, what's Carol's last name?
Was Halsey.
Halsey or something, yes. So she sent me a whole bunch of pictures, but this was in '79. It's the Century House out on Route 34, which at that time it burnt, I guess it was called JJ's Place. So that place had burned down. Freedom Sausage, which was south down by Harding. I was actually on that one, AJ was on that one. So, funny story with this one. Me and AJ were brand new. We get to the station at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and who shows up besides us two is Gary Buffington. I love Buffy. Great guy, funny guy. Buffy, what do we do? Get in and take the truck. We don't know how to pump it. Don't worry, I'll show you when you get down there. So we get down there, and this thing is rolling. I mean, there's fire blowing out everywhere. What do we do, Buffy? He goes, I don't know what to do, how to pump this truck. Oh my God, my dad's gonna kill us.
We were ready to walk back to town.
We did good. We got water on the truck. We got water on the fire, which is the important thing. Unfortunately, it was so far advanced at the time. You know, a lot of times, unless you're right there when it starts, it's difficult. Here's Jer Bars. I worked out there the night before or night off, one or two. But yeah, here was Jer
I wouldn't be
Bars.
saying that too loud.
I know. I was cleared. I was cleared of the arson on that one. But I guess Barb and Jerry, what was their life? They lived up above the restaurant. This was the night before Thanksgiving, if I remember correctly. And I want to say the story I got was some of the Earlville guys that went in the front door and the floor was gone.
Well, two of them were here, Larry Todd and Ken Tillman.
Yeah.
You guys go in on that one, Larry and Ken?
Steve was there.
Yeah.
Went so far.
Yeah. So there was Jer Bars. House fires happen. It's bread and butter for these guys that do this job. But I threw this one up there because there's a story behind this one.
Yeah, there is.
This was, again, December of '92 up in Rollo. The house is no longer there.
A Sunday night.
Yep. And they did rebuild on the same spot, but the house ended up getting torn down. The fire department has the Christmas party every year.
At the Manor.
At the Manor, is where it used to be. So this fire comes in.
Maybe Karen Tillman could enlighten us.
Yeah. So we go out, or the guys all went out, fought this fire for a few hours, and it was cold. Cold, the guys' gear's freezing. We get back to the Manor Steakhouse for our Christmas party, and Bobby Goodbread was the bartender, and he just kept feeding the wives drinks. And all the women, all the ladies were feeling no pain that night. At all. Huh?
And no appetizers, they ate everything.
Oh yeah, they ate all the appetizers, so everybody come back hungry. Appetizers are gone, booze is all gone, empty bottles everywhere. It wasn't that bad, but they, this sticks in my mind of that fire effort, so. AJ, let's go to the next one. Fires can hit home too. Here's a picture from September '97. One of the ambulances caught fire. Do you remember what the issue? I'm assuming it was an electrical problem.
It was electrical on the oxygen bottle.
Okay.
And the wiring burnt, and it burnt the tubing on the oxygen tank, and that's what started the fire. So there was somebody at the barn at the time who saw that, or smelled it.
So that's the worst kind of fires for us, and it does happen. It's when your firehouse burns down. It's not good PR. But unfortunately, it was an accident. Fire deaths. There's been a lot of deaths. I shouldn't say that. Not been a lot of deaths, but there's been several throughout over the years where people have passed away in a fire. This one was from the 1950s. I'm sorry I didn't put the dates down here. Where a father and a son passed away. I think it was on Stilson Street, if I remember reading it. I'm sorry, Chestnut Street, where it was. Mr. Hathaway and his son, Lloyd Hathaway, and I think the son's name was Michael. But they both perished. Here was another one where 3 children of Clowers kids. I believe the last name was Clowers.
On the Hyde Farm up the Rollo.
Yep.
And that was in the 70s? I don't know. In the 70s maybe?
Early 70s.
Yeah. And,
That was Papa's fire.
yeah.
We were called for mutual aid help.
And you know what? Sometimes we're a small town and this stuff hits home. when I was 19 years old and out in Earlville, hanging out at the fire station wanting to learn, the guys went out for a house fire. Cool. Wish I could have went. Sprayed that water. The guys come back, and I remember walking up, and I'll never forget this, walking up to John Todd. Uncle John, how's it going? What do you mean? I said, how's it going? How's that fire, man? I just lost my granddaughter. And my heart sank. And I remember that to this day. So these guys, they go out. They're going out there working on their neighbors. They're going out working on their family. And sometimes bad things happen. But they stick.
Those are Jean Pettinger from Earlville. Those are
Right.
her children.
Those were her
So
children?
it was in Rowell, but she was from Earlville.
Okay. So, you know, and daily these guys go out on car accidents. How many times you've been out in car accidents in South Ottawa and 34? We all hate that intersection.
Too many.
You know, and it's the same with ambulance calls, you know. You go out and it's your neighbor or a family member. In a small town, that stuff's gonna happen. Put some pictures, some firefighters throughout the years. Again, these are just stock photos that I threw up there. So you might know some of these guys in here right now. There's Denny Sproul might be in the back. RW, who can forget him? Benny Sherlow. Tony Hamill, who was an assistant chief. Roscoe Ron Goodbread.
He's here.
Erwin Sam. I think this group of photos were taken for maybe ID badges, but I threw them up there. My dad, Keith Flickinger, was a captain. KT, Kenny Tillman. He's assistant chief now. The Todd boys, Chuck, John, and Larry, kind of runs in the family. And of course, here's a picture of your current group of guys. I don't know if that's everybody, but it's
It's majority.
majority of the guys that are currently on the fire department right now. And I wanted to throw in some pictures to kind of show you guys some of the equipment that these guys currently have. And again, if you get any questions or if you want to speak up, whatever. I don't know the age of these units, but these are both engines.
14, that's 2015.
So 2015, and the other one is a
1994.
94.
The thing about 1411, it's a rare engine. It's on a Spartan chassis, and the engine is in the back. And there was only 3 of these made in the United States. Nobody wanted the engine in the back in the fire service. We have one, Coloma, Illinois has one, and the other one's out in South Dakota somewhere, and I can't remember where. We went and looked at one in South Dakota. You were on that trip, Larry, I can't remember. But the reason we bought it was because the engine's in the back, you can hear in the cab. You don't have that engine noise. Whereas 1410, the engines, you can see where the engine is. It's right there in the cab, so you've got that noise. And that was 11 still is a good truck. But yeah, we've upgraded it to 10, so that's where that is.
These are some tankers.
Yeah.
Just haul water to these guys for these guys.
1426 is our main tanker or tender. 1425 is also a tanker, but it's also our main brush truck. You can see the nozzle on the front of the truck. That's all done by a joystick in the cab. So if you're good at video games, you're good on that truck. And we're not, so we struggle at times. And also that's on a Freightliner chassis. That is a 4-wheel drive chassis. So, but we don't use it. The only time we use 4-wheel drive is when we get in trouble and we back out. We don't use it going through the field because you can really get in trouble if you're in 4-wheel drive and get stuck. So usually we don't use that part on that truck. 1415 is our rescue truck right here. We carry various tools and it'll hold up to 6-7 firefighters, 2 in the front, and we've got in the back is a walk-in cab or walk-in scenario. And then 14, I don't know, we call it 1401, that's the chief's vehicle. He keeps that at all times. He responds directly to scenes in that vehicle. And the advantage we like about that is Larry can get there and he can size up what's going on. And he can start calling for help even before we get there. Or sometimes if it's in the daytime, he's wondering where we're at. He's questioned Kenny Tillman and I numerous times, like, what are you guys doing? So, but it's nice he can get there and kind of decide what's going on, what equipment's needed, or what other departments are needed. 1413, we still have. It's a brush truck.
This one here, A.J. talked about one of their newer trucks, how it has nozzle on the front end. Years ago, when the guys would have a field fire or grass fire or whatever, they jump on the front and there's a little hose and spray a little water. Well, after they've ran over a couple, and I'm not talking Earlville, I'm just talking in general, firemen have died because they fall off the front of these things and get run over by their own vehicle. So now, that, you know, and it makes sense, Keep your firefighters in the cab, not outside where they can fall, and the guy driving the truck can just drive with one hand and that joystick with the other. It's a lot safer.
Yep. Plus you're not eating all that smoke.
Absolutely.
On this you ate a lot of smoke. And then the bottom picture is 1412, that's a 1982 Alexis. And what's different about that truck, you can see the pump is right there on the front end exposed. I still like the front mount pumps myself, but we've gone to the side, but I really like the front mount. You can see a whole lot better. And that's an 82, we still have that one in the house.
Here's a picture I found actually on eBay. It was a picture from the dealership of 1945. They bought this truck from a Lexus, a fire truck manufacturer down in Lexus, Illinois. But here's one from 1945 the city bought.
Ambulance call.
A couple of pictures earlier from vehicles that they no longer have. No, weather message. Not too bad. But anyway, here's some trucks throughout the years that they no longer have. These were bolt tankers that they had in an old engine. A couple more trucks. Their old rescue truck. This one came from New Jersey. Me and Tony Hamill went out and drove it back. And a little red van for some of the firemen. They probably remember seeing that go on two wheels a time or two going around a corner up by Whitaker's.
Mr. Hyden probably has a few stories on that one.
Yeah, back in Tommy's day. Next couple slides go into training. So these guys just don't respond to calls and that's it. They got to put in time for training. And it's a lot of hours. It's a lot for a brand new person. It's no different if you want to be a career firefighter or a volunteer or / paid on call. The same basic certification. These guys, we all have to do the same stuff. So your basic, just to get basic certified firefighter nowadays, you got to put in 180 hours in classroom. Well, I shouldn't say just classroom. You're also out doing skills and stuff like that, but it's 180 hours you got to put in just to become a firefighter, and it's certified through the state now. So you don't have to become certified firefighter, but if you were to go out and go on a fire and go in and get killed, and you're not a certified firefighter, you got to help the fire department because you'll get sued up one side and down the other. And it's all, these are standards that just come down from the federal government that all trickle down here to small town USA. Besides, once they get all their basic stuff, these guys can go into specialty areas. There's Hangel rescue, there's trench rescue, confined space, structural collapse, building collapses, swift water rescue, hazmat. There's a whole gamut of stuff just on the training that these guys have to go through. Besides training, they also go out and they do pub ed stuff. Here's, not Jen Kappas, this is Jessica Ramey, thank you. Doing some pub ed with the kids. Kids all love that stuff. You're on deck, big boy. We thought we would bring one of Earlville's firefighters up here and kind of, real quickly, kind of show you what firefighters wear for gear.
First on, don't put your coat on quite yet. First he has his bunker pants on and boots. They just pull on, put your suspenders up. Then the next thing he'll put on is his coat. And time he gets everything put on, his helmet, his coat, air pack, that slides off a little bit. We're up to 74 pounds of gear right now. Time he gets everything on. Our coats are a little bit lighter, so that helps, and the air packs are a little bit lighter, but we're still, after you get all suited up, you're carrying an extra 74 pounds. This gear is good to about 1200 degrees, and once it gets above 1200 degrees, it won't burn actually, but it'll actually turn different colors. It can be a bad thing. There's a coat up front there, a black coat. It shows, it's got like a little red streak on it. That's what will happen to them. Back to that Freedom Fire, I got in too deep that day. I come out, and Dean Aggie, the assistant chief at the time at Mendota, he sent me with a hose, and I'm like, I'm mad. I mean, this guy's squirting me with a hose, and I'm mad, you know, what are you doing, you know? And I turn around, and he goes, take your coat off, and my coat was completely red. I had gotten in too deep. Because he also, if he wants to, he can wear a Nomex hood. And what that does, it protects you from the heat. I'll never wear one again. Because I couldn't tell how far in I was, and that's how come my gear got burnt. You're almost cocooned, you're too protected. So I'll never wear one. I mean, a lot of guys will, but I never will because of that.
So just to give you a little breakdown again, what some of that stuff wears, or I'm sorry, what it weighs. We'll flip one more slide, AJ. I think the next one talks about what this stuff costs. Because unfortunately, this stuff is not cheap. And I'm sure AJ or Larry, you guys, these are older. This slide's probably, I don't know, five years ago. I don't know what it costs.
Well, his gear, just his bunker pants, his boots, bunker pants, coat, and helmet will be right around $3,200 right now.
So,
and gloves, he's got gloves he wears. They'll be about $3,200. And then the air pack, I mean, right now they're probably about 89, almost 9 grand. So
the stuff isn't cheap, you know, and nobody wants to raise taxes, you know, so I know the board's pretty good not wanting to raise taxes, but unfortunately, prices on everything goes up. So unfortunately, a lot of times our taxes go up. You don't want to raise taxes, that's why they have fundraisers, try to raise money to offset some of this.
and so, by the way, this is
grant too to help out on gear and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I was able to secure a $25,000 grant from the Illinois State Fire Marshal's office. So we were able to buy some new gear with that, and then the board helped us with the rest. And by the way, this is Jake Pickard. He's Jeff Pickard's youngest.
Which son. I had no idea, which makes me feel really old. Jeff was a year below me in high school. So anyway, that's just, we just wanted to bring him out here to kind of show you firefighter. Stuff has evolved over the years. You know, when Earlville Hose Company started out, I think in a year or two after they started, they had rubber coats, you know, and nowadays they got all this stuff, Nomex and.
Well, when we first got them, they had the hip boots. We didn't have the bunker gear.
Hip
we
boots,
had the hip boots. Yeah.
The old rubber coats.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So.
You go out in a fire with them on, and sweat, cooking right inside the coat.
Right, absolutely. So, you know, the next few slides kind of talk about how does the fire department get out their calls, how do they notify there's a call. This is a current picture of where I work now at the Valcom. This is in Peru, inside of the old Peru Police Department, so it's right downtown on Route 6. The doors opened up here, it just got totally redone, and I think it was, Amanda would help me out here, 3-4 months ago is when he had an open house, something like that.
Sure.
But it is, I can't remember, my memory's shot, I apologize. But this is where I spend my time nowadays, and you know what, I miss the fire service immensely. It was my life. But this is where I'm at now. It's okay. I enjoy it. It still keeps me active with the guys. And here's a picture of some of the guys from that day. I actually, after I left, before there was a photo op, I didn't know that, so I missed my picture.
That might have been on purpose.
Exactly, on purpose as well. Come out of here. Okay, so I tried thinking about, when I started this, I got thinking about, Myrtle. What I remember as a kid growing up and when I first joined the fire service, Myrtle was a lady that always answered the phones. Well, that got me thinking. There's been several ladies or people over the year that have answered the calls. They didn't have 911 back then. You called, I think it was 246-8341. I still remember the phone number. And years ago it was probably a 3 or 4 digit number, you know. But anyway, I got back into the 50s. Wanda Mooney, originally I believe, sent me some stuff, and it was also in the Earlville newsletter, where her mother, Gertrude, started answering phones in the 1950s, and retired from doing that in 1962. And then in 62, when she gave it up, Myrtle started. And this kind of stuff of what Myrtle did, probably the same kind of stuff Mrs. Mooney did as well. Besides answering phone calls for fire and ambulances, she also took calls for Doc Fisher, the funeral homes, the vet service, Hanley Funeral Home. I don't know if your mother did the same kind of stuff at all. I'm sure she probably...
Phones.
You had 3 different phones?
Phones in our dining room.
In your dining room. So, and I'm assuming they maybe had a certain kind of a ring so you know if it was a fire or not. I don't know.
No.
Okay.
You had to answer it.
Okay.
You recognized the phone.
Okay,
Well, we had the two-party one, 2-1
okay,
for our private one, and then we had one for the ambulance,
sure,
which we didn't have.
okay.
At that time, the first one out.
And so these ladies sat in her house all the time. My understanding is Myrtle only took one day off a year, and that was Memorial Day when she go visit graves. The rest of the year she was there. If she had to leave for a doctor visit or whatever, like Mrs. Mooney, she probably paid somebody. I think you had mentioned in your article that she paid 50 cents an hour for somebody to watch the phones while she was gone.
It was the same thing for when she did babies.
Okay,
That was the 50 cents.
the going rate. And then it talks about the whistle. The Historical Society has a great article about the whistle in the back. You could probably talk for an hour, and I know I've been rambling on more than I should, and I apologize. And we are winding down, but the whistle was set off, what, 5 times a day? 7 in the morning, 12 noon, 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock at night. So, I guess I told you when to go home, but we always knew when to go home, because when the
Yeah.
streetlights came on, it was time to go home.
Or Donnie Cox was on.
Or Dottie Cox would be telling you to get home. After Myrtle gave it up and retired, Helen Hill did it. She did it until, what, October of 2002, when everything got switched over to Mendota. 911 came, and they got switched over to Mendota, and the phones were answered there until Valcom opened up, and everything got switched down to Peru, probably back in 2016, something like that. Because of consolidation. The state mandated that. And there's 3 places in LaSalle County where 911 calls are answered now. That's the Sheriff's Department, the City of Ottawa at the Fire Department, Police Department there, and us at Valcom. But we're pretty sure that within probably 5 years, the city or the state's going to come down and mandate just 1 per county. So there's a picture of Bobby Goodred with that whistle that's in the back. From what I read in the newspapers, they started fundraising for that in 1917, right during the war. And it got installed in 1918, and I don't have any idea when the last time it was used.
When they put the roof on the ambulance, right, Larry?
Yeah.
But I don't know what year that was.
What year that was?
No, they put a new roof on the ambulance barn, so they took the whistle down.
If you get the opportunity to read the article the Historical Society put on about the whistle, read it. It's pretty interesting. All right, we're down towards the end, guys. Trivia. Who wants to take a guess where the first American Fire Department was formed?
Philadelphia's Ben Franklin.
Who said that?
Steve.
I did.
Give that man a bag of gummy bears, or gummy worms. He's got gummy worms. All right. Ben Franklin founded the first fire department, Union Fire Company, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So you got gummy worms coming. Now, for the bonus, what year was that formed? Smart boy.
I don't know.
Anyone want to take a guess?
I went to Earlville High School, I just remember.
Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody? I need somebody so somebody can win another pack of candy.
You click it, it's
Yeah, just click it one more time.
Go ahead. 1736 is when that first fire department was formed in America. So, okay, we're at the end of what we got to present to you guys. Is there any questions that I can answer? AJ, Chief Todd from the back, that can answer you for about the fire department at all?
We should introduce past members.
Yeah, you know what, I'll tell you what, that's a great idea, go ahead.
I'll introduce some current and past members. Right up here we have Chief Larry Simpson. He's Randy's dad. He was chief for a long time. Very respectful. If I missed anybody, let me know. We have Rich Roth. He's a current firefighter. We have Denny Sproul. Put your hands up when I say your name so that people can see that. There you go. Behind them, unfortunately, we have Don Heckathorn. He's the chief in Leland. He's been very quiet. We're very surprised. Going back, we have a retired trustee, Ken Tillman Sr. He was a trustee for years. Next to him is Tom Heitman. He was a fireman here for years. Very respectful. Let's see. Yeah, we got Gary West right here. He's Randy's brother-in-law. He was on the department for a while.
Don't hold that against me.
I know he's got a Mendota hat on, but that's all right.
Hey, it all started here though.
Yeah, I know. We do have a fire bell in the house. Mrs. Karen Tillman, she was a fire bell at one time. We have Jeff Ignatius. He was a fireman. Now he's on our ambulance service. In the back behind him is Chief Larry Todd. Next to him we have Matt Ramey. Then we have Assistant Chief Ken Tillman. And we have retired firefighter Ryan Goodbread. And then sitting down in front of Ron is Assistant Chief Steve Sellers from Paw Paw. And we have Jessica Ramey in the back next to her husband. So if I forgot anybody, I'm sorry. Yes, Jean.
We have Chuck Dowie's daughter.
Yes, we have Chuck Dowie's daughter.
Husband from Peoria.
From Peoria. So, and we have Steve Budak, which would be Bill's son. And we have from Oswego, Greg Lofton. He lives here in town, and he's also on Oswego's department. So if I've missed anybody, my apologies, but I think I've got everybody.
Does anybody have any questions that we can answer? Well, if not, we appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come up and talking to us and letting us kind of ramble about the fire department. So, thank you very much.